redundancy is this the only option, as we've seen this an awful lot in the press at the moment with companies starting the 45-day consultation period. And obviously, it's quite a concern with the pandemic, how it's affected companies. What I'm going to go through is based on GB employment law. So as obviously if you're in Wales or Scotland or Ireland, that will be different. But what we're going to look at today is changes to terms and conditions, redundancy alternatives and the redundancy process, because the decisions you make, the discussions you have, the documentation you use, getting it right first time is key, because very often we see a lot of claims where these processes are put into tribunal and it's morally right and procedurally wrong. That seems to be the issue frequently. So what are our options after shutdown? Well, the job retention scheme is built around furlough. We all know about that now and we know how it works. And it's currently in place until the end of October, but in its current format of 80% to claim back, ends at the end of July in its current state. Now, this might not be suitable for all businesses and you might need to look at other options. Now, some businesses are still fully operational and need all the employees working, but may not be able to fulfill the contract at this time because of your suppliers and the like. And the situation may be temporary, or more permanent solutions may need to be considered, as we've seen through companies in the press. But the consideration of businesses' needs after furlough is never been more important, because we know the dates when furlough is changing and the impact and the costs it's going to have to companies as well from the end of July. So what about changing the terms and conditions? Because this can be fraught with issues if it's not done properly. So change to terms and conditions, this can be in regards to express terms laid out in the statement of main terms of employment, handbook, workforce agreements, collective agent agreements, policies, protocol booklets, etc. But also, you can also consider implied terms. These are terms that are too obvious to be written down, but they have become the custom and practice in your business. The express and implied terms are contractually binding and legally enforceable, and they can't be changed without agreement from both parties, which is why communication is key. Now, in the current climate, the terms within a contract that may need to be changed include hours of work, times of work and the place of work. Now, this can be a temporary change or a permanent change, but both need agreement. And in order to change terms and conditions, you need to follow a procedure of communication, consultation and confirmation. I will just say, where the furlough scheme is in place, if you're looking to invoke the flexible furlough, which is started, you then have new agreements where flexible furlough they agree to as well, because again, you're changing the way that's been happening the last 3 months. Okay, so it's not letting me go forward. Just bear with me a moment. Okay, here we go. Sorry about that. So first of all, consultation. It's really important to have formal meetings with the employees to explain the extent of the changes you want to make, but explain them why you want to make them. Also, to explain what will happen if you don't make the changes, and allow them to ask questions about the change. Also, responding to the questions is key, as you may need a series of meetings and offer an incentive to encourage agreement in certain circumstances, because the discussion with employees is so important. But also, any changes, it's important to get written agreement to the changes from all your affected employees. But also to confirm in writing the date the changes will take place, because audit trails are so key. And placing a copy of the written agreement on the employee's personal file. And consider any consequential changes, a change to working hours or days, or may mean a change to annual leave entitlement. So again, I will talk about audit trails such a lot, because it needs to be that it wasn't just a unilateral agreement by you that you forced upon the employees, but you've got into consultation, discussion with them and they can agree. But also, we have found when it's done this way, changes of terms and conditions, the alternatives could be redundancy. The employees are much more liable to go into discussion with you. But if no agreement is reached, you know, you've tried all your efforts to obtain an agreement, they haven't worked, there is another option. You can dismiss them and re-engage them straight away. So what you're doing, you're serving contractual notice to the employees to terminate the original agreement, but you offer them immediate re-engagement on a new contract containing the changed terms. And if this is taken up, the employee would retain their length of service. If there's something you may have to consider because the communication's breaking down, please do take our advice first, because it's not a simple process. Classic one that we saw in the press end of last year was Asda, that the people that didn't take the new re-engagement, they were going to put them into tribunal and the like. So there is a set process to protect you as an employer. But what are the alternatives to making staff redundant? Now, before we go into these, the latest government incentives to reduce redundancies on Wednesday by the Chancellor, he announced that employers who retain furloughed staff until January 2021 will receive a £1,000 bonus per employee. Now, we have seen mixed reaction to this. Some are saying that's superb, other companies are saying it's not enough. But the terms are staff must earn at least £520 a month and be brought back to do proper work. So this may be a good time to consider if it's possible to keep staff on until at least January. And if you can do this, you can get additional funds from the government. So that can be a lifeline for some businesses. But let's have a look at the options. So first of all, the options are reducing working hours, because lockdown may mean you've had a decrease in business demand. So if this is the case, you simply haven't got enough work for your staff to do. So again, this is why flexible furlough was brought in. But one way to solve this issue is to ask staff to work fewer hours in order to help save costs. As we said earlier, employees may not be overly enthusiastic with the prospect of reducing their hours, but if redundancy is something that's likely, they're more likely to agree. But, remember, as an employer, you're not permitted to make such a change by a term in a contract of employment. Staff need to agree to this change before you can implement it. Freezing training budgets. Some businesses spend a significant amount of money on training. It's a great way to develop internal talent, but it's something you can afford to cut temporarily. But if you do this, make employees aware of the fact that the change is only temporary, and you can resume training once the business is in a healthier place. And the reason we say make sure the employees are aware it's temporary, because it may be in the contract terms what's training available above the statutory and mandatory. But it's important as an employer you're cautious if staff are engaged as part of a training contract, because removing the training part of the role could lead to a breach of contract claim. So again, it's important to look at what contract they're sat under in your business. Third option is freezing pay. This is a particularly good option if you offer annual bonuses as a way of rewarding staff. If possible, try not to provide these for the financial year. But again, you need to check your contracts of employment. If you freeze pay, and employees are entitled to it by contract to receive the bonuses, benefits, you could be in breach of contract. But if you do have a discretionary clause outlining you will only make these payments if the business needs permit it, you could rely on this clause to freeze pay. So again, it's referring back to your contract terms. But if bonuses have been paid regularly for the past few years, you may also encounter an issue, as employees may be able to argue that bonuses are a custom or a practice due to their frequency, which means they may be entitled to receive it even without a contractual clause. Again, if you feel this could be an issue, then we're more than happy to talk about this to you offside with what you have embedded in your business and the best way to handle this. The other issue is introducing flexible working arrangements. Now, you may think that redundancies are the only way to help you reduce the number of staff at work, whether this is for financial reasons or to ensure social distancing measures, but flexible working offers an alternative to this. So for an example could be you permit staff to work from home on a more permanent basis, or you could stagger shifts to reduce numbers in the building at any one time and keep overheads low, and also to ensure the social distance and density, reducing density is in place effectively. But another alternative is layoff or shortage of work. So another alternative is placing employees on temporary redundancy. This means you provide them with no work or corresponding pay for a period of time until there is work for them to do. But without a clause permitting this in the contract, staff will need to agree to be laid off without pay. Otherwise, you'll need to pay them in full If they work for your company for at least a month, they may also be entitled to Statutory Guarantee Pay, which is called SGP, and it's currently £30 per day for a maximum of 5 days. If staff have at least 2 years service and are laid off for 4 or 6 weeks in total, they may be eligible to receive statutory redundancy pay. So again, it's referring back to your policies and procedures of what you have embedded in your business where a layoff and shortage of work is concerned. Now, what the definition of a layoff is where employees are not provided to work and the situation is expected to be temporary, such as no work available due to the current coronavirus pandemic. But it only applies where the employer does not provide work, but the employee's pay is dependent on them being provided work. Also, the other element of this is the employee must also remain available for work. The definition of short-term time working is where the employer requires employees to work fewer hours than their normal contracted hours, such as reduction in work. That can be a supplier's reduced supply because of fewer staff due to the virus. But anything less than normal working hours will be short-term working. If the employee is qualified to claim redundancy pay, and we'll look at redundancy pay a little more later, the amount of work done needs to be less than half the normal hours. So there are stringent elements to all of this. Now, statutory guarantee pay. So employees with at least 1 month's service are entitled to be paid the statutory guarantee pay if there is reduction of hours, work, or something that affects the normal working hours of a business. But the payment does depend on several factors, including complete 24-hour working days being lost, the employee being available for work, and not unreasonably refusing an offer of alternative work. It's paid for a maximum of 5 workless days in any period of 3 months. And as mentioned earlier, the rate is £30 per day, as this amount increased on the 6th of April 2020. So LOST, entitlement to redundancy pay. So this is a layoff or short-term working is what LOST stands for. Employees can become entitled to a statutory redundancy payment if they've been placed on LOST, subject to certain conditions. They need to have 2 years minimum service, follow the required statutory procedure, resign with appropriate notice, that's a statutory minimum 1 week or contractual notice, whichever is the greater, again, which refers back to your contracts of employment. Being on LOST for either 4 or more consecutive weeks or 6 or more weeks within a period of 13 weeks, where no more than 3 weeks are consecutive. So again, that's elements that need to be considered carefully. But what is a redundancy? Now, a genuine redundancy situation where there's either a closure of business in which the employee was employed, a closure of the place of business where the employee was employed, or reduced requirement for employees to carry out work of a particular kind. Because very often when I'm talking to employers, they will say to me, I want to make so-and-so redundant. And I always ask the question, why? Because it can be very often because they don't really work as a team, or they just do what they have to do, they don't go above and beyond. Well, that's not a genuine redundancy situation. That's an issue with performance. As with a genuine redundancy situation, is the job role is no longer there, but the person is. It's really important as a business to prepare a business case, because you are encouraged to establish a written business case for redundancy, because this really is a key document in the redundancy process. And if you are challenged after redundancy process through an employment tribunal, then this key document plays a very big part. As the document sets out why a role is at risk and can help to evidence that a redundancy was genuine. But essentially, this exercise, you'll answer the question, what has led to the need to consider redundancies? So being specific is also really important, to include actual financial figures and projected figures. So setting out information in the tables. How much will the redundancy process cost? How will the proposed redundancy meet the objectives you need to achieve? And how much will you save? But also, as part of this process, include any alternatives the business has already taken or considered to avoid redundancies. Now, very often this can be a talking to your staff, because they may come up with suggestions to avoid the redundancy process that maybe you haven't considered. But let's look at the redundancy process, because there's things you need to consider. So first of all, identifying the pool of employees who are at risk and the selection criteria you're going to use. And the selection criteria must be carefully considered, and it needs to be objective, which is objective and subjective very much come into play when redundancies are considered. If 20 or more redundancies are proposed within a 90-day period, the collective consultation is triggered. It's important to hold an at-risk meeting with infected employees. And the consultation process, and this is determined by how many redundancies are proposed at one establishment and what that consultation process is. So after the consultation meeting, employees in a pool will need to be scored, and you'll need to apply the selection criteria to each employee and score on this basis. It's really important to have more than one manager carry out the scoring to ensure fairness and to reduce the risk of discrimination, because very often we see if only one manager has done the scoring, then it comes back that, well, they didn't really like me, they didn't really, work well with me, and I think they discriminated against me in this element. But also using the scoring matrix is really important because this identifies which employees have the lowest scores. And once the consultation process is finished, provide redundant employees with a notice of termination. Employees who work their notice period have a right to reasonable paid time off work to search for new work or to carry out training. But also, when you send the redundancy notice of termination, please make sure you make them aware of their right to appeal the redundancy dismissal. To have that written in the same document. Where suitable alternative employment is available, offer this to the employee. The suitability first, look at the job objectively, but then requires the individual employee to find it suitable based on their own circumstances. Also, employees have a right to a 4-week trial period in their new job. And also, please offer them training in their new job to help them to do the job, because what you don't want is to not offer them any training, there's no audit trail in place, they resign and claim constructive dismissal because you could put them into that job knowing they couldn't do it. Now, employees with 2 years continuous service are entitled to a statutory redundancy payment, and the amount of this pay depends on the employee's age, length of service and weekly pay. Maximum pay is currently capped at £16,140, but please again refer to your policies and procedures and contracts, because if you have enhanced redundancy pay schemes, you would need to honour those. I do often find, and I'm not suggesting anybody here has done this today, but employers have found contracts, policies and procedures and pretty much copied them over into their business thinking it would work for them. And I've seen enhanced redundancy pay schemes that they hadn't really considered, and then it's a breach of contract claim where they haven't been paid in line with the policies and procedures. So to summarise, are there redundancy alternatives? So being aware of your options to decide the best option to suit the needs of the business. Now, this is why flexible furlough has come in to help you, so you don't have to go into a redundancy process straight away. But where redundancy is concerned, following the correct procedure at all times is key, and also to have it clearly audited. Because, as I mentioned before, the decisions you make, the documentation you use, the processes you use, is very much getting it right first time as an employer, otherwise you leave your business heavily exposed. And we make sure and work with you to make legislation work for you, the employer, to get the right outcome you need for your business. And the way we do this is offering 2 elements of the service. We have the employment service, which is the HR side, where we can put in place bespoke contracts, policies and procedures to reflect what you need from your staff within your business arena, and making sure it's always up to date in line with legislation that comes out. Also, we ensure compliance and you have all the correct stationery and forms you need to use. And this is also through a software process that you can have called Bright HR, where you can document everything that's going on within your business and with your staff. And also all the information in there is the information they've given you, so that conforms with GDPR. There's also the health and safety element, where we can embed your full health and safety management systems. I think never has it been more important than COVID-19 be secure in your business, bringing people back in. Also, It logs and has on board all your risk assessment tools, your accident reporting management systems through an online system of BrightSafe. This is also underpinned by unlimited advice, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. We also give commercial legal advice on all the advice we give over the advice lines that you have the dedicated number into our HR team. The advice is documented and it's underpinned by insurance. So if you do take the advice given and you follow the process and you're put in tribunal, you don't need to worry, because we can give you legal representation and we represent you and settle the awards, as we have our own in-house solicitors and barristers that work for Croner only. We are only representing as an employer. Also, where the health and safety service is concerned, obviously you have unlimited advice again, and you have the risk assessments and accident management embedded. And if you are put into tribunal, we can represent you for any health and safety issues. Also, we have an employee assistance programme. Now, there's been an awful lot of talk about wellbeing and mental health and how the pandemic has affected people. And it can affect people in many different ways, because it can trigger things that maybe were underlying before. Working from home could be an issue, or all of a sudden there's problems with finance because of what's happened. It's led to more issues with home life. It's led to more issues where, you know, there's been caring for dependents, obviously with the high death rate, and also work life, and how people are adapting to that. And some people adapt well, some people really struggle. So, but it's been proven there's a 36% reduction in absence if you have an employee assistance in place, because you're obviously ensuring the well-being is taken into place, because under the Equality Act changes is not just employing people, but it's a holistic approach to their well-being as well. So we have Health Assured, you may have heard of it. We own the company and we won the best mental health provider for the 3rd year running. So if you feel this is something to embed into your business moving forward, it's never too late to put it in. Do have a word with us. We can obviously give you this information. But what I've spoken about before, how we embed that into business, how you bring in people into business, how you document all the information with flexible furlough and login hours, and how to go about it. We have our online system, Bright HR. And I'm just going to run through how we work with you where your staff are concerned, making sure you're COVID secure and everything is documented effectively. And you're also placing the obligation on your staff to comply. I'll just let this run for a moment.
Introducing Bright HR's Back to Work Navigator. The Back to Work Navigator is easily accessible from your Bright HR dashboard and will guide you through all of your return to work processing. You will see the number of currently furloughed employees within the business and a quick link to create back to work rotas, ensuring that the safety and well-being of your staff is accounted for as members of the team return. Rotas will also alert you to current employee absence as you add shifts, ensuring that the correct individuals are assigned to the correct working times. Once a rota is published, everyone included in that rota will receive a notification informing them that a new rota has been added and that they're included. This will be sent directly to their Bright HR account via email, and if they have the Bright HR app downloaded on their mobile, to their mobile phone too. In order to track and monitor these staggered shifts, you also have access to our free clocking in and clocking out app, Blip. Blip will allow you to oversee the working times for your employees and add any instances of lateness to their profile should start times not be adhered to. You will also be able to view all current and past furlough absences in the calendar, giving you at-a-glance information pertaining to the start and end times or ongoing furlough absences within the business. The Back to Work Navigator will also allow you to create company-wide notifications, which will be sent to every member of staff on the system, providing you the quick and simple means to convey important messages and information to your employees. As part of Bright HR's Back to Work tools, we have also created a Back to Work e-learning course with information and guidance on various aspects of return, such as social distancing and hygiene measures within the business, providing a certificate upon completion of the final assessment. Our new employee status feature will allow you to view and edit the location of an employee if they are away from the company site, assisting with the preparation of social distancing measures within the workplace. The annual leave summary report will further support this allowing you to track annual leave taken and the remaining balance for individual employees within this annual leave year. You also have access to our 24-hour advice line, connecting you to a member of the team who can provide expert advice on all things required in the return to work process. Finally, as part of our Back to Work Navigator, you will also find all of the support, guidance, and advice required to ensure that you are both compliant and safe when staff members return. Resources here include downloadable templates which can be utilised and adapted to suit all of your business needs. Log in to Bright HR today to guarantee that you are back to work ready and fully compliant with return to work procedures.
So as you can see, it offers everything you need to manage your staff effectively and making sure you're on the right side of legislation and also using the right processes. I appreciate redundancy is a sensitive situation, but if you would like any further information or you want to have a discussion on a one-to-one with things you are considering and you want help with, or you just want to explore a little further, please do not hesitate to email Nick at nick.babington@croner.co.uk, as you can see on the screen. Unfortunately, Nick wasn't able to be here today, but he'd be delighted to assist you further. He is also very local to your area, so if it's something you want to explore, then you know that we're working with you nearby. I hope the webinar has been of assistance to you. I'm now going to unshare my screen and come back into the room. And from my point of view, just thank you for your time this afternoon.